哇，我好闲呐，我又回来了。我看完了我排的班儿的52章啊51章，又洗了一下衣服。今天不是很困，所以就没有睡觉。我们继续来把这篇文章看完，然后我试了一下 B 站的直播，太麻烦了，而且 B 站还不让那个海外的 IP 播，所以我们就继续来看这个吧。好，现在估计不会有人了，继续来念。念到了这个2025年的1月2号的时候呢，committee 就同意这个球团队去给这个小女孩 dose。然后下面开始了这个 skeptical 对于他这个 experimental 的 result。好，我们来看啊。But four of the experts science asked to assess the figure, including one of the original reviewers of the Nature manuscript, expressed concerns about how well the primate proof of concept study was conducted. Primate 应该是灵长类的这个动物实验啊。The submitted paper had no control samples to show the stain was selectively highlighting the gene editor. It's completely unconvincing, says David Sanders, a biochemist at Purdue University who has studied gene therapy. One can't have the confidence that one isn't mostly looking at the background staining. 我的理解就是生物它有些图吧，它那个区域性是比较那个大的，就是你把它 zoom in 了之后呢，你看到的东西和你整个的 full picture 是很不一样的，它应该是这个意思。An accompanying graph suggested that AAV9 only altered 30% of targeted neurons, but that was several times more than achieved with similar vectors in other primate studies. A fifth expert, a neuroscientist who asked not to be named, said the criticism raised may be valid, but there was no obvious data manipulation or image doctrine. 就是说这个整体 data 应该还是没有问题的。Another potential concern, however, emerged about 1 month before May was treated. 这个很重要啊。The final conclusions of a primate toxicological study conducted at PrimeMed, 那个 CRO, 四川那个 CRO. The company's report dated 17th February 2025 concluded all 4 monkeys that received the therapy, whether at low or high doses, developed moderate to severe liver damage. 总共就做了4只猴子，4只猴子还都有这个 liver tox， 简直了就是。That data alone should have triggered additional studies at lower doses to determine the maximally tolerated dose, says James Wilson, the former University of Pennsylvania researcher who led the ill-fated Gelsinger trial and who is now president of Gamma Biotherapeutics, a gene therapy company. One monkey which received a high dose of the viruses also showed kidney damage. This could have been a result of a well-known reaction to AAV gene therapy, thrombotic 这个就不念了就是溶血症啊 pattern of microscopic blood clots that can be fatal. Fatal. Because the team at PrimeMed did not collect the data during the key window in the first month after the monkey's infusion, it is impossible to be certain of the cause. Under China's dual-track biomedical regulatory system, non-commercial investigational-initiated trials at major hospitals can test novel gene therapies without the kind of rigorous review from national drug regulators that is required in the US. The rules have varied over time, but investigators typically register the study in a national clinical trial databases and undergo a scientific and ethical review from the local institution, which can vary in their attention to detail. 这个双轨制也是比较有意思。 The hospital ethics committee did not review the final report from the primate safety study before it approved May's trial, according to documents from the Shanghai Yangpu District Health Commission. Jason and Linda said Chiu described the findings to them, but seemed unconcerned about their significance. 其实是有告诉他的，但是就是可能粉饰了一下太平。The trial would move forward. The contract signing with Xinhua Hospital is basically complete. Chiu wrote Jason in a WeChat message that Chiu wrote Jason in a WeChat message that January. Next, we'll have the kickoff meeting, sign the informed consent, and then administer the drug within 30 days. On February 19th, the family arrived at Xinhua Hospital to sign the consent document and run some tests on May's blood. The form described thrombotic microangiopathy as a possible outcome that would require prompt treatment. The children's version, the one with the book metaphor, asked May herself to check a box marked yes or no. If you don't want to write, it told her you can draw a smile face instead of your name. According to the parents' recording, Yu Yongguo, the medical doctor overseeing the clinical side of the study, told them he had selected a doctor who performed 3,000 spinal injections in a year to deliver the gene therapy. 2 years earlier, as part of the clinical trial testing Chiu's Rett syndrome gene therapy, this doctor had performed the same procedure in a child without incident. 中国的这些医生啊，最牛逼的就是因为他做过很多 practice，所以他这个技术还是挺好的。在美国这边打个针吧，你经常就会被戳到戳一堆窟窿，他也找不到你的这个血管。Yu also indicated the biggest risk for May was the possibility that she had antibodies to the viral vector. Other than that, he said the data shows it's relatively safe. Yu did not respond to multiple requests for comment. A test before the trial started found May had no antibodies. Still, to blunt the body's immune response to the viral infusion, she would get a shot cause of prednisone, a steroid, according to the informed consent document. Although some AAV-based gene therapies approved by FDA are still delivered with prednisone alone, gene therapists are increasingly erring on the side of caution and incorporating more powerful immunosuppressant drugs such as rapamycin or 另外一个 rapamycin 还是比较有名的。The decision and others might have gotten more scrutiny if the trial had been reviewed as a commercially sponsored study by the National Medical Products Administration, China's version of FDA, rather than an investigator-initiated trial. In either type of trial, charging for an unproven therapy is forbidden under Chinese law. The informed consent noted that participation in this study will not incur any additional cost to you. All expenses will be borne by the sponsor. 这个蓝旗新图 Gene Technology 就是那个邱子龙他的公司。But the family knew better. Yu seemed to recognize the contradiction during his conversation with them. On the surface, it's not money you're paying, but actually it's all being paid by the company, he said at one point. If you've contributed, you have stake in it. On 23rd March 2025, the day before the procedure, the family settled into a shared room inside a crowded pediatric ward. When the other girl in the room broke into tears, May handed her one of her favorite stuffed animals, a blue bird. She liked to give things to other kids, Jason said. 明明是个还可以的小女孩啊，真惨。The next day, May put on a brave face as she was taken to the procedure room. Yu's hand-picked doctor inserted a needle between two vertebrae on her lower back and withdrew just over a teaspoon of spinal fluid to create space for the drug. Then he swapped syringes and gently pressed down on the plunger, filling her spinal canal with viruses. After 3 days, May developed a fever, a common reaction to AAVs that was expected to last for a couple days. Chill swung by as her fever began to wane. He assured Jason and Linda that their daughter's condition would soon improve. As they walked him to the elevator, he announced excitedly that the Nature paper has been accepted with revisions. 3月份结了. Then he added make an even bigger splash, the first brain-directed gene editing therapy. May did not improve because she hadn't urinated since the infusion, a sign that her kidney had been seriously injured. Her doctors had limited her fluid intake and she became desperately thirsty. 好痛苦啊，这小孩真太可怜了。The platelets in her blood also dropped to dangerous level. 就是那个这应该是血小板。It was the exact sequence of symptoms that the consent form had warned the family about, but nowhere did the form explicitly indicate that any of this could end in death. Nor did that come up during any conversations with Chill or other doctors. Jason and Linda said death should always be mentioned in the first in human trial, says Greeley, the bioethicist. 他确实没有说会死人啊。Doctors took May for a full body CT scan and then rushed her to the intensive care unit. Her brave face had begun to crack. Mom, I want to go home, she told her mother before vanishing into the ward. Over the next 24 hours, Jason and Linda sat in the waiting room with their elderly parents. Chill, who had returned upon hearing of May's problems, seemed unable to process it. He was still with the family the next morning when the doctor emerged to tell them May had died. Chill was in shock, Jason recalled. So was the family. They stood by May's body and cursed her one last time. So 惨，好惨啊！这个小女孩。2 days later, the hospital's ethics board convened an emergency meeting and concluded that May's death was definitely related to the treatment. According to its report, the cause of death thrombotic microangiopathy. Over the next few weeks, Linda and Jason say Chill expressed his sadness to the family, but he was unwilling to speculate on what went wrong. The parents say they asked him to withdraw the Nature paper out of concern that it could mislead other families with a similar affected child, as well as researchers. Chill initially agreed. Eventually, they say he stopped responding to their queries. Yang returned the full payment he received for the work. 看没？他这个学生胆子比较小。In September 2025, the district health department fined the hospital approximately $3,600 for failing to properly oversee the trial and not registering it as commercially sponsored research on the national database. As a responsible physician, Yu was named in the report, and the hospital required him to receive verbal counseling, according to the family. Although Chill's company had taken out insurance for the trial, the family said they were offered no compensation. They had not asked for it, they said. Instead, they blamed themselves for not asking more questions and for trusting Chill's authority so completely. The muted response to May's death sharply contrasts with the Gelsinger's tragedy decades ago. His death drew widespread headlines and prompted a major self-examination by the gene therapy field. The university where the trial was conducted paid a fine of more than $500,000 and had further gene therapies suspended. FDA barred Wilson, the principal investigator from Human Research Studies, for 5 years for violations that include failing to disclose adverse reactions observed in the primate toxicological studies on Gelsinger's informed consent form. Public disclosure is essential in safely moving this field forward, Wilson said. Hmm. Within days of their daughter's death, Jason and Linda moved into a hotel and later a new apartment, locked away in the old apartment with all the furniture and their daughter's possessions. They also cut off contact with some of their closest friends. I don't know how to reply to them, so I pretend not to see their messages. Linda says, I'm not so brave to face everything. Jason and Linda were still mourning the loss of May when they learned in February that a version of the Nature study had been published after a review process that had stretched over a year. The family's genetic data had been removed, and a sentence thanking them for their participation and support had been eliminated. The paper still described a base editing therapy directed at their daughter's mutation, but it featured entirely new data on its ability to work in monkey brains. I remain very skeptical of the data in this figure, Gray says. Chew's team had added control samples at the request of peer reviews, but the controls appear to have been processed at a different time for the treated samples, using different microscope settings, according to Mike Rosner, an image integrity expert. That makes any comparison challenging. All the original mouse experiments, which were funded by the family, also appear to have been redone. 呼，有意思啊！我第一次念的时候没有发现这一点，就是他，哎，这个人是有点意思的。Yes. 哦哇，就是说他这个人还是挺鸡贼的啊，他把这些老鼠实验都重新做了。Campbell 就是那个法国人啊，who reviewed the original manuscript，不是，是那个French Canadian，他是发现这个病的这个主要的贡献人，who reviewed the original manuscript from Nature said he hadn't noticed the extent of the changes when the revised version landed in his inbox, and he had approved it. Notably, the paper also did not mention any of the kidney and liver troubles from the primate safety study of the therapy. The paper had an enthusiastic reception. These promising results might pave the way for the development of an effective clinical treatment. Kevin Bender, a neuroscientist at UC San Francisco, wrote in an accompanying commentary. At the time, Bender had no idea that a girl had received it and was already dead. Meanwhile, Chinese state media CCTV called the work the first ray of hope for countless families suffering such disease. Some families in Jason and Linda's WeChat group said they plan to reach out to Chu about their own children. When Jason and Linda saw that, they decided to act. They submitted a complaint to the death of Chu's University demanding an investigation and a retraction of the Nature paper to prevent more children from suffering and our blood and tears flowing in vain. Gray, Saunders, and several others who reviewed the paper for this story all believe Nature should request and analyze the raw data and image files from the authors. They also say the study sources of funding should be fully disclosed. To not acknowledge one of the sources of funding should be enough for retraction. 因为他没有 acknowledge 那个 parents 嘛。Saunders says, Greeley observes that it would be unreasonable for the family to have veto power over the publication, but he would like to know whether Chu had told Nature's editors about the outcome of the clinical trial and why the family was removed from the paper. In a June response to an email from the parents noting their child's death and other concerns, Nature's deputy editor, Victoria Ronda, wrote that the ethical issues they raised fall outside of our pure view in terms of data integrity, and that the matter should be handled by the university. 就 Nature 就说这个不该归他们管啊。In a more recent statement responding to queries from Science and Retraction Watch, the journal said it was not informed of these issues or the sanctions the hospitals had received before it published the paper. Had information relevant to the editorial assessment of the manuscript been disclosed during consideration of the paper, it would have been carefully evaluated as part of our decision-making process, noted Francesca, Nature's chief biological, clinical, and social science editor 我觉得 science 也比较 sarcastic， 只是想去踩 Nature 两脚啊，明显的。On April 30th, Jason and Linda received an email reply from the university followed by a phone call. The dean's office was taking no action against the Jew. The payments made to Young were simply research service fees for the clinical trial, though he was given a formal admonitory talk for his behavior. 但是这个杨其实把钱还了。The Nature papers the university wrote bears no relation to the experiments you funded， 因为他们重新做了所有的结果。这个有些时候就觉得这个实在是怎么讲，中国人的这些小聪明很没有必要啊。During a Zoom call last month, framed by the bare white walls of their home, Jason and Linda described how each had coped with Matt's death. At times during the conversation, Linda became overwhelmed and turned away from camera as Jason pressed on. They recalled that when May's birthday came around earlier this year, they said nothing to each other, though they both assumed it was on the other's mind. We do not discuss that, Linda said. During the call, Linda finally told her husband how she had spent the day. While he was at work, she finally returned to the old apartment and sat down on May's bed, surrounded by all her things. She had purchased a chocolate cupcake on the way and now picked at it as she imagined that her daughter was still at her side. By the time she finished telling her story, Jason was welling up. Linda glanced over at him tenderly. My husband didn't know this, she said. I cannot cry every day, but that day I think I can cry in the room. 结束了。好吧，悲剧啊。小女孩死的应该还是挺痛苦的。好吧。讲完了。感想呢，在 blog 上写了，在 B 站上也写了。总之我觉得这篇文章还是挺值得读的。好啦，拜拜了大家。